Well, good afternoon to you. I am Dylan Radigan back in New York, and today's big story continues to be 30 million jobs, fresh off the second week of our 30 million jobs tour, and the conversation gets louder and bigger as the weeks go on. 27% of Americans now reporting that they are either unemployed or underemployed, and nearly half of Americans say that they are struggling or suffering in this economy right now. The dialogue about the compelling need to reform taxes, trade, and banking to drive a culture of investment in this country so that we can create the 30 million jobs we need has never been more crucial. Later this week, we're off to take the conversation direct to the belly of the beast, Washington, D.C. Our first guest today, one of the few politicians serving in this country, aspiring aggressively to engage in exactly this debate. Her focus on the manufacturing industry specifically and the so-called American Jobs First initiative. It's a package of 4 unique bills, pieces of legislation that would offer to strengthen and enforce the very simple but incredibly necessary and profound Made in America laws. Joining us now, Congresswoman Betty Sutton, and if you wonder where she's coming from Ohio in the 13th District, which is one of the places we will be visiting over the course of the next few months. Nobody knows about the need for jobs, Congresswoman, like the folks in Ohio. Brief us on the specific pieces of legislation you are advocating.
Thank you so much, Dylan, and thank you for taking on this mission because there is much we can do. The American Jobs First initiative, as you said, consists of 4 bills, but in a nutshell, what they do is they say that when we're using taxpayer money to build our infrastructure, whether it's our bridges, our highways, whether it's our water or sewer infrastructure, we ought to use American man-made or made steel, iron, and manufactured goods. Because not only that way do we put people to work building the infrastructure, we also put them to work producing the steel and the iron and those manufactured goods so we get more bang for our buck. And the other bill, the Foreign Manufacturers Legal Accountability Act, simply says that when foreign manufacturers sell things into our marketplace, we ought to stop them from undercutting us on safety, undercutting the costs of our manufacturers, and hold them to the same kind of standards that our guys have to play by.
Yeah, the thing that really stunned me when we launched the 30 Million Jobs tour out in California a couple of weeks ago and spent a bunch of time around the Bay Bridge and with the steel manufacturers who were outbid in that regard. The Chinese won the bidding for the spending of U.S. tax dollars on Chinese steel to rebuild the Bay Bridge by underbidding by $400 million and then coming inside on the timetable, only to then spend the $400 million that they underbid and come in late. It's very difficult to compete with somebody who can make up a number and then come back to it. I want you to listen to the gentleman who was one of the senior executives at Oregon Iron Works, where they were outbid.
The sad part here is the job loss. We lost 3,000 jobs over the course of the last 5 years of U.S. workers who are not employed at this point in time. These jobs went to China. We lost high-wage jobs, family wage jobs, jobs that pay health and welfare benefits and 401ks and pension programs. All of that is gone.
Explain to us how the laws that you are, I mean, it's absurd. It's absurd that we even have to have this conversation. You and I both know it, but we do. What pieces of legislation do you have in front of the Congress of the United States that can help us resolve this?
Yeah, there is no excuse for that having happened to those iron workers or other iron workers or steel workers across the country. The initiative that I have contains 3 bills aimed at Buy American. One of them deals with our water and sewer infrastructure and simply says that when we build it, which we are and we must across this country, we need to use American iron, steel, and manufactured goods, period. That's just the way it needs to be. It will put our people to work, and no one produces steel or iron or manufactured goods any better than we do right here in Ohio and in the United States. The other bills also deal with the process that the loopholes that exist in our Buy American laws that allow people to avoid complying by issuing waivers. And it says that before you issue a waiver, before our government issues a waiver to allow other steel or manufactured goods from foreign countries to be used for our infrastructure, they have to take into account the job loss, the very job loss that we just heard about, because it's never in the public interest, really, for us to lose jobs. So It increases transparency, and all in all, it closes up those holes that have allowed for some of the skirting of the law to take place.
And where would the political resistance to a raft of legislation, like who would resist this, who is resisting this, and how do we, in the media and elsewhere, better expose them so that we better understand maybe the rational components of that resistance if it's there, and if it's not there, get rid of it?
I don't really know that there's some kind of rational resistance. And in fact, these bills, most of them have significant bipartisan support. Several of the pieces have actually been passed through a committee in the past, or even passed in other forms on the House floor, but never quite made it all the way to the finish line. So I think inertia is standing in our way. I think that if you can help to raise the issue, if we can get Speaker Boehner to put it on the House floor, I can't imagine people voting against Buy American laws. I can't imagine people voting against holding foreign manufacturers to the same standards as our manufacturers and our workers have to undergo. So we just need to raise consciousness. You know, there's nothing, this doesn't add some significant cost. It's common sense, and it can make a real difference for our people.
Behind all of this is still the unresolved nature of our trade relationships more broadly, specifically with China. They tax our imports to their country at 25%, as you surely know. We tax their imports to our country at 2.5%. They continue to massively rig their currency relative to ours. To what extent can pieces of legislation like yours that are kind of the tip of the spear on this issue provide more clearance and more momentum for broader trade reform?
I think that that's a great question. I think we get these bills rolling and we get them passed. We open up the door for the currency manipulation bill that we passed in the House in the last Congress that the Senate has already acted on. It passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. All we need to do is get it to the floor. We just need to get Congress to act. We hear a lot of talk about bipartisanship. We hear a lot of talk about the need for jobs. And now it's time to see that action. You know, we heard about how members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, sat together during the State of the Union. But we really need to see is people act together to pass these common sense reforms. Yeah, as Beau Biden said when we were talking about mortgage reform, he's the Attorney General in Delaware, it is time for action. It is not time for talking. And we appreciate your engaging in that regard, Congresswoman. Thank you so much. Betty Sutton from the 13th District in Ohio. And watch out, Washington, D.C., or be joyful, perhaps. Our 30 Million Jobs Tour is heading your way this Wednesday as we will deliver 3 action-packed shows from, as we like to call it, the belly of the beast. And then we are off to Austin, Texas, February 8th, 9th, and 10th, where we'll get into some significant issues around energy independence in this country before we head to 3 colleges through America's heartland. We'll take a look at what's in store for students graduating in the class of 2012 in this jobs market. Of course, the hint to mom and dad is not to turn that bedroom into a rec room just yet. Coming up here on the DR Show, an Auction 2012 special report starting today, going all week, on what bought government is costing us. We're uncovering the corruption that is actually taking money out of all of our wallets because of how D.C. runs. Plus, what outspending your opponent 4-1 will buy you in a primary. The answer is a big boost in the polls. And later, who's calling you a moocher? Why our specialist says we've become a nation of moochers.